This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's show and continuing to listen to the show. Before I start talking anything sports, I want to remind you guys to subscribe to the podcast so you always get those alerts and you never miss an episode again. So you get those notifications on your phone, laptop, however you may be listening, and you never miss an episode when we drop it. Also, make sure to leave us a 5-star review in the comments. We would really appreciate that as well. And don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We want to interact with you guys more on social media, whatever you have, social media platform-wise. We are on those as well, so make sure to give us a follow. We have a fantastic show for you guys today. Later on in the show, I'm going to be talking about some players in the NFL who could have either a comeback season, who could bounce back after a poor season, or who could be a pop player, a dark horse MVP candidate maybe, or just have a surprise year. And also, I'm going to be talking about the Miami Heat and how they might be going after a new super team, with reports circulating about where Oladipo wants to play potentially as early as next season's. Reports are coming out that he might want out of Indiana. So I'll talk about Victor Oladipo and the Miami Heat later on. And stick around to the end of the episode where I'm going to be giving you guys my top 10 NFL head coaches in the league, the top 10 coaches in the league. So make sure you stick around for the end of that as well. But first, I want to talk about a quarterback that I believe may not reach his full potential and may struggle this season, and that is none other than the rookie quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow. Now, I mentioned this before when I was giving my whole segment about the rookie class and how I have some worries for Joe Burrow, how hard the division is. Not necessarily any discredit to what he did his senior season, but if that jump could be replicated to the NFL. And it gave me an idea to do a real deep dive on the division and Joe Burrow's jump and give my full opinion on how I believe Joe Burrow will do as an NFL quarterback and how he will do specifically as the Cincinnati Bengals quarterback. So let's get right into it. So Joe Burrow, obviously last year had maybe the greatest statistical season of any quarterback in college football history, 5,671 yards, 60 touchdowns to just 6 interceptions, so a 10-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. But if you compare that to his previous season at LSU, his first season, which would have been, I think, his redshirt junior season, those stats were obviously way lower. And if you do the math, Joe Burrow between his junior and senior season made a 2,777 yardage jump and a 44 touchdown jump, which is absolutely unheard of when it comes to quarterbacking, when it comes to college football, when it comes to professional football, a jump like that. And again, no discredit to Joe Burrow. What he did was absolutely incredible and amazing and probably won't ever be replicated again, or at least, in the very near future when it comes to statistical season that he had. Obviously deserved the Heisman. But the reason why I'm not as confident as, maybe as a Tua Tagovailoa for the Dolphins, I think Jordan Love will be really good for the Packers once he gets his wheels turning. Why? I think Sam Darnold could be, a really good quarterback once he develops. Kyler Murray, some other guys will talk about in my last segment. Why I don't necessarily believe as much that Joe Burrow could be that special type quarterback that he was that last season in college when he gets to the NFL is not just because of his season, but also because this isn't LSU anymore. That coaching staff is not there. And now, the roster for LSU between Joe Burrow's junior and senior season didn't actually change all that much. Still had a great offensive line. Those weapons were the same. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was there. The same group of guys was pretty much there between Joe Burrow's redshirt junior season and in his most recent redshirt senior season. The only major thing that changed was the offensive coordinator, and that was Joe Brady, who came over from the Saints and became LSU's offensive coordinator. Now, Joe Brady is not with Joe Burrow anymore, and it begs the question of, is Joe Brady like a Lincoln Riley? Now, I have talked about this with Baker Mayfield. We'll take a little bit of a sidetrack for a second. While Baker Mayfield was incredible under Lincoln Riley, he's kind of regressed each season. Baker Mayfield, his rookie year in the NFL, was not as good as his senior season at Oklahoma, and last year for Baker Mayfield was not as good as the year before in Cleveland or the year before at Oklahoma. And it appears to be that the farther that Baker Mayfield goes away from Lincoln Riley, the more he doesn't look as great. And obviously, Lincoln Riley is the quarterback whisperer. Again, I don't necessarily believe in the term QB guru or offensive guru or quarterback wizard, but there are a couple, and he is definitely one of them. I would have hired him as the head coach if I was the Dallas Cowboys. Maybe an offer was made. Who knows? But back to the topic. I'm worried that Joe Brady could be that for Joe Burrow. I'm worried for Joe Burrow because, again, that statistical jump doesn't just happen because of work ethic and everything like that, which Joe Burrow obviously has. An insane work ethic, insane killer instinct, grinds as anybody, obviously changed some things up. And I'm not discrediting, but to make a 44 touchdown jump and almost a 3,000 yardage jump from a season to another, other things have to happen. Again, LSU's season lined up for them. Tua Tagovailoa got hurt, and that kind of took Alabama out of the equation as well. But just like Lincoln Riley does with quarterbacks at Oklahoma, making anybody look good, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts when he transferred there, Spencer Rattler will be incredible this year for them, could be a Heisman candidate, and just keeps turning out NFL quarterbacks. Maybe Joe Brady is like that. Again, Joe Brady is no longer at LSU. He's now the offensive coordinator for Carolina, who I believe will have a good season offensively. But, again, the head coach of Cincinnati is Zach Taylor. He's not Joe Brady. A lot of people, including myself, would probably consider him maybe the worst coach in the league. Again, was a Sean McVay assistant, and after the year they went to the Super Bowl, the Rams, that is, immediately got hired, and it was kind of everyone trying to find the next Sean McVay. Everyone's trying to find the next Bill Belichick. Those things usually don't work. Not a lot of coaching trees branch off a ton of success, except for maybe Andy Reid's, as you could look at. But getting back to Joe Burrow, there's also a couple of other things. So maybe Joe Burrow is an extremely talented quarterback and can replicate the success he had at LSU at the NFL level. But this is an LSU, not the same roster, not the same coaching staff, not the same division, not the same schedule. Now, let's get into the division, which I believe is the biggest X factor in why Joe Burrow might not actually pan out the way that we all want him to. Again, I'm not calling Joe Burrow a bust. I don't think he'll actually be a bust. I think he will at least be a serviceable starter in the NFL, just like Baker Mayfield is. But again, I don't see Joe Burrow coming into this league and throwing 60 touchdowns and 6 interceptions and over 5,000 yards. Maybe one season, maybe he could develop into that. But again, I just don't see it from Joe Burrow, especially when you're playing in this division. Now, the great quarterbacks, or great rookie quarterbacks that come out early, you want to be drafted into a good situation and hopefully a division that isn't killer, right? Tua Tagovailoa went to the Miami Dolphins, who could, play him whenever they want. It appears to have a good coach in Brian Flores, but no one knows that for sure. But that division is getting pretty easy now. The Jets haven't done anything the past couple of years. Bills just had a 10-win season for the first time since the 90s. And obviously the Patriots are kind of in a no man's land right now. Who knows what will happen with Cam Newton and Bill Belichick. Justin Herbert was drafted by a great team, the Chargers, great roster. He could develop. He's going to sit for a little bit first, not going to be thrown into the fire. Jordan Love is obviously going to sit for a little bit. Kyler Murray was drafted by the Cardinals, and he's in not an easy division, but sort of a similar situation than Joe Burrow, but I think Arizona's more talented than Cincinnati. Patrick Mahomes got to sit a year with Kansas City. Things like that matter, and Joe Burrow was getting thrown immediately into the fire on the team that was the worst team in the league, and not only were they worst team in the league, they were not expected to be the worst team in the league, which is a big thing here. Last year, the Dolphins were expected to be the worst team in the league, and they overperformed. Instead of winning 1 or 2 like people thought, they would win 5. Cincinnati was supposed to win 6, maybe even 7 games, and they won, I think, either 2 or 3. Not good stuff to be underperforming with that coaching staff. Now, how I see it playing out with the Bengals this year is I decided to go to each positional group in the division, the AFC North, which consists of the Bengals, the Browns, the Steelers, and the Ravens, one of the best divisions in the NFL, and see where does Cincinnati rank at each positional group and coaching-wise in the division. So the Bengals have the worst O-line, and I went off a lot of PFF grades as well, Pro Football Focus, which is like a football analytics tool, really great, everything like that. So I went off some of that as well for these rankings. The Bengals in the AFC North have the worst rated offensive line, third worst. They're in third place with running back. I like Joe Mixon a lot, but they're in third place. They have the worst tight end group, third in wide receivers, worst defensive line, worst linebackers, worst secondary, and I think they have the worst coach as well. So in that division alone, you are already starting off at a disadvantage, and Joe Burrow is starting at a disadvantage when it comes to offensive line, defense as an entirety, running back core, and maybe wide receiver and tight end core. Again, Cincinnati has some good weapons. They added some good guys in the draft. I like T. Higgins a lot. I like Joe Mixon. They got to figure out if they're going to pay him or not. AJ Green, who knows? He hasn't signed his tender yet. Is he going to come back to Cincinnati? Does he still want a trade? Obviously, Tyler Eifert went to Jacksonville. They never really replaced a tight end. Maybe if they could go after somebody like a David Njoku or even an O.J. Howard if he's on the market could help. But I don't see that with Cincinnati. I also think Cincinnati is the worst-run organization in that division besides maybe the Cleveland Browns, but the Browns do look like the up and up. They are definitely, I think, maybe the worst location when it comes to free agents in that division, right next to Cleveland as well. They don't have the history that Pittsburgh does or the recent success that Baltimore has. Not to mention, Joe Burrow is playing in the division with the Ravens, who will win that division next year, who I have touted as the most talented team in the league, and they just have the former MVP Lamar Jackson on that team, and he's only going to get better as a passer. The best coach in that division is John Harbaugh, then Mike Tomlin, I think then Kevin Stefanski, then Zach Taylor, so you already have the worst coach as well, and I think it could be ugly for Joe Burrow this season. I don't think he's going to come in and light the world on fire. Just playing in that division alone, you have a hard schedule, one of the hardest in the league. To have to play Baltimore twice, Pittsburgh with Big Ben twice, and if Kevin Stefanski can coach this Cleveland Browns up roster twice, you could be looking seriously at 5 or 6 losses off the bat for Joe Burrow, which is extremely, extremely tough, especially seeing that division isn't going to get any easier at all, because Baltimore, not only are they super talented, but the core of their team is relatively young. Marquise Brown, Mark Ingram still in his prime, and then obviously Lamar Jackson super young as well. And when you look at Pittsburgh, their defense is extremely young with TJ Watt and Mika Fitzpatrick. They're going to be sticking around for a long time, and eventually a Big Ben replacement will be drafted. And Cleveland is also an extremely young team with Baker, Nick Chubb, some other guys, Tristan Wirfs, the tackle from Alabama that they just drafted as well. Not Tristan Wirfs, I'm blanking on his name right now. And that's a young core there as well. So it's not like Cincinnati is in a hard division, but in a couple of years it'll get easier because they're older teams, like maybe the Patriots were last year. No. These teams are young. They're going to be good for a while. Baltimore's going to be good for a long time. They're going to be right up there with Kansas City battling for the AFC. So when you have all of these factors piling on Joe Burrow, what do I think is going to happen? And now I just believe that this is a repeat situation with Carson Palmer. And now Carson Palmer, again, was an extremely talented quarterback, got drafted by Cincinnati, I think number 1 overall, was super talented, and he could not overcome the dysfunction of Cincinnati, the poor free agents in Cincinnati, poor drafting of Cincinnati, and that division obviously was still being dominated by the Pittsburgh Steelers and to a certain extent the Baltimore Ravens as well. And eventually, Carson Palmer was just like, enough, I need to move on. I need to go somewhere else to try to actually further my career and have some success. Went to Arizona, made it all the way to an NFC Championship game. I'm not saying that Joe Burrow, that career way is going to happen to Joe Burrow, but I'm saying it absolutely could. And I'm not betting. I wouldn't bet that Joe Burrow is going to be this 3-time Super Bowl champion with the Cincinnati Bengals. Not with that division, not with those rankings. Again, I'll go over them again. I think, based on what I'm seeing, the Bengals have the worst offensive line in that division, worst tight end group, worst defensive line, worst linebacker, worst secondary, and the worst coach in that division. And they're in the bottom half for wide receivers and running backs as well. That division is stacked, guys. Again, it is absolutely stacked. Cleveland is a stacked roster if they can get it right. Baltimore is the most talented team in the entire league on paper, and the Pittsburgh Steelers defense is top 5. They went 8-8 last year with Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph as their quarterback. If Big Ben is even 85% of what he's been over his career, they could be a playoff contender for a long time too. That is the problem with Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. It's not just the situation, but it's also the division. Cincinnati has never been a team where free agents go. Cincinnati has never been a team that's necessarily drafted well as well. And I know Bengal fans will say, well, what about that short stretch where I think they made the playoffs 3 or 4 straight years? But then the Bengals won none of those games with Andy Dalton, who is a good quarterback in my opinion. Not as good as not an elite quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, but at a certain point in time was a really good quarterback taking the Bengals to the playoffs. Again, I like some things that they've done. I love the T. Higgins selection. I thought he was a steal in the second round. I love Joe Mixon, but who knows? Cincinnati's a notoriously cheap organization. Are they willing to pay a running back top money? He's their best offensive weapon. AJ Green, again, is an X factor. Will he want to come back? He has yet to sign his franchise tender, which means means right now he is quote-unquote not playing for the Bengals in 2020. He wanted a trade last season. It did not happen. Does he still want to trade? Will this be like an Anthony Davis-Zion thing where a lot of people believe that maybe Anthony Davis would want to come back to the Pelicans after the draft of Zion and AD still wanted out? Will it be a similar situation with AJ Green? That'll be a big question as well. Again, I'm concerned for Joe Burrow because of the situation and the history of the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't know if he's going to translate to that all-powerful, godlike quarterback we saw last season. But one thing I think could really save Joe Burrow's career, potentially. Again, I'm not deeming it over. Joe Burrow could obviously just light it up and prove me completely wrong. But again, because of the situation, the roster, the talent, I'm skeptical that Joe Burrow might even be the best quarterback coming out of this class when it comes to translating into the NFL. If Joe Brady, who is currently the offensive coordinator for Carolina, let's say he lights it up as an offensive coordinator, and even though the Panthers are definitely not going to win the division, because again, they're in a stacked division as well with the Falcons, Bucks, and Saints, but let's say Joe Brady leads the Carolina Panthers offense to a top 12 offense in the league. And, the Bengals struggle again. Maybe they only win, I think, 3 or 4 games this season. But Joe Burrow shows moments, he shows spurts. But again, he just can't overcome how hard the division is, the lack of talent on his team, and the poor coaching of Zach Taylor, let's say. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the Bengals moved off of Zach Taylor and maybe hired Joe Brady as a head coach. That would be something that would be enticing to me, because then you get Joe Brady and Joe Burrow reunited, and while that division still might be hard, if anybody knows how to get the best out of Joe Burrow, it would be Joe Brady. So that's an interesting storyline to follow at next offseason after this season. But again, I'm skeptical of Joe Burrow, and I'm not exactly sure he'll be able to be the player he was in college in the NFL. But we will see. It's going to be interesting to watch him play this season, his rookie season. All right, we're going to take a quick short break. On the other side of the break, I'm going to be giving you some players in the NFL who could have breakout seasons or comeback seasons. I'm going to talk about both of those groups of players, and we'll get into that right after this quick short break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode and listening so far. I just got finished talking about why I think Joe Burrow might not succeed, at least in the next couple of years in the NFL, and maybe might have an underwhelming career because of some limitations with Cincinnati and that division. Now, I want to take a more positive spin when it comes to some NFL players. I want to give a list of players who I think will have bounce-back seasons and also breakout seasons. So bounce-back season means someone who was either hurt last year or just underperformed in general, and I think they'll return to their form or maybe even having a career year of guys who have already had some success in the league. And breakout season are guys who haven't had necessarily big success in the league, who I believe could have a huge jump or have a huge season and really put them on the map. So let's start off with the bounce back season crew. First up, I have Juju Smith-Schuster, who had a poor season last year, and I think is one of the reasons why he hasn't been paid yet by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, there's been rumors that Juju might be leaving Pittsburgh after the season because, again, lack of payment and just some contract negotiations not going great. He did not break over 1,000 yards this year like I believe he did his first year with Pittsburgh, and that is a big deal. If he is not a 1,000-yard receiver, Juju Smith-Schuster is supposed to be, AB's replacement when Antonio Brown left, and supposed to really take charge and be that number one receiver for Pittsburgh, and that really didn't happen last year. Now, I think it'll be a bounce-back season because I really do believe Juju Smith-Schuster is uber talented and one of the best receivers in the league. I just think he had nobody at quarterback. Again, Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph were the quarterbacks last year. They were more of a running offense because of that. Again, they went 8-8 and it worked out for them, but they were more of a ground and pound team and play some defense. I think Juju will have a bounce-back year because you're kind of completely doing a 180 when it comes to quarterbacks. Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph are more conservative. Obviously, tried to not throw the ball that much because of just poor play. Again, more of a running offense, and then they would go give it handed off to their defense. Big Ben's the complete opposite of that. The last time we saw Big Ben, he was still throwing for over 5,000 yards despite his age. Obviously coming off a major, I think it's an elbow surgery, which yes is a big deal. But again, if Big Ben even returns to, like I've been saying, 80, 85%, maybe even 75% of what Big Ben has been, he's going to throw the ball a ton, and that means a lot of targets for Juju Smith-Schuster, which means a lot of yards, and I think he will have a bounce-back season. So Juju Smith-Schuster, in my opinion, will have a bounce-back season. Khalil Mack of the Bears obviously had a good season last year, but not a great season. And I think one of the reasons because of that is because he was playing for the Bears. Now, again, that might sound weird because I think the Bears are a good team, but Khalil Mack was traded last year. Again, Khalil Mack last season, by the way, just to quickly say some stats, only had 8.5 sacks last year. That is the lowest amount of sacks since his rookie year and the only other season besides his rookie year where he didn't have double-digit sacks. And again, I don't necessarily think it's just because of, maybe Mitchell Trubisky, but in all honesty, what happens with a defense over the course of an NFL season is if the quarterback is poor and really limiting the play of the offense, and the defense just has to keep going out there because the offense can't get everything loaded, they're going to get gassed, they're going to get tired, and the play is going to go down. Not that Khalil Mack didn't care or didn't work hard, but I think he was kind of just like, all right, like he kind of mailed it in almost at the end of the season because of Mitchell Trubisky and everything like that. But I think he'll be rejuvenated. The entire Bears organization will, with a new quarterback, Nick Foles. I don't know how much success he will have. He had success with Matt Nagy, I think in Philadelphia maybe, or no, I think, or in the offensive coordinator, or excuse me, the quarterback coach was also in Philly during that Super Bowl run. Again, some familiarity with Nick Foles there and how good he was in Philly. If they could replicate any part of that, then I think Khalil Mack will be rejuvenated and he'll have a big bounce back season. I expect Khalil Mack to get back into double digit sacks, 11, 12, in that 10 to 12 range. I think Khalil Mack will get right back in there. Again, he's one of the best defensive players in the league. Next up is Von Miller, who also had a down season last year, and I don't know what it was. It could have been age. He's getting up there a little bit. But again, Von Miller is still one of the best defensive ends in the entire league, or an outside linebacker, whatever you consider him to be. Again, so last season, Von Miller had 13 sacks. Or excuse me, 8 sacks, 13 assisted sacks, but assisted tackles. He had 8 sacks last season. Again, the first time he hasn't had double-digit sacks since 2013, where I believe he actually was hurt. So in reality, it's his first full season without having double-digit sacks. I mean, it could be some age, but also I think that the Denver Broncos season really didn't kick off until Drew Lock came in, who I'll talk about later. Again, the offense was stagnant for Denver until Drew Lock came in. They obviously were fantastic down the stretch, and I think, again, similar to a situation of Khalil Mack and the Chicago Bears. Now that Drew Lock has a full season, they drafted a lot of offensive weapons, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler. I think Bronco fans are calling it the orange blur is what they want. Also the signing of Melvin Gordon. That offense is going to be good for Denver next season, and I think Von Miller will be a little bit more rejuvenated and get back to double-digit sacks. Next up is Matt Stafford, who honestly, in my opinion, is the favorite for comeback player of the year. He obviously missed a majority of last season with a back injury. He's been Mr. Iron Man, never gotten hurt really for the Detroit Lions. Now, I don't think the Lions are going to be good, and I've made the comparison many a times that Matt Stafford reminds me a lot of Carson Palmer, uber talented quarterback, just playing for a poor organization that can never get the pieces around him. Only a few times have they done it. Megatron retired early, and Ndamukong Suh was there obviously for a little bit as well. So I think Matt Stafford's going to have a big bounce back season. I think he will be good. I think Matt Stafford's going to continue to throw up for high yards, high touchdowns, and just have a really good season. Again, and I just don't think the Lions are going to go anywhere, but I do expect Matt Stafford to not regress and have a poor season. If he stays healthy, he will have a good season. He'll probably get over again 4,000 yards, a lot of touchdowns. high QBR like he usually does. The offense will do good. They'll put up points, but Detroit just won't win games as they haven't seemed to be able to do forever. So again, Matt Stafford, I think, will have a bounce back year. Sticking with the quarterbacks, we're going to do the rest of this list with quarterbacks. Nick Foles, who I just talked about when talking about Khalil Mack, I think he'll have a bounce back season in comparison to what happened with him in Jacksonville. Jacksonville was a disaster when he did play for them. When he wasn't hurt, he was not very good. I don't think that Nick Foles is going to have the same exact success or the same exact record that he had with Philadelphia. I don't think it'll be that good. But I do believe that the Bears are a playoff contender with Nick Foles at the helm. That system will have a lot of RPOs, which is what Nick Foles takes pride in, what Nick Foles is at his best at. And again, Allen Robinson, Tariq Cohen, some other guys, some good talent on that offensive end. Again, RPOs will do Nick Foles well, and I think some familiarity on the coaching staff will as well. I don't know what Nick Foles' stats will be. I don't know if the Bears will even make the playoffs. I definitely think they'll be in contention at the end, and I think Nick Foles is a better quarterback than Mitch Trubisky. I think he's going to win that job, and I think they're going to have a lot of fun with that offense. It'll be more exciting, and with that defense, I could totally see the Bears getting to 9 wins, potentially sneaking into that extra NFC playoff spot that starts this year. Next up is Cam Newton and the New England Patriots. Again, in comparison to the last 2 seasons he's been hurt, how can Cam Newton not have a bounce-back season if he's healthy? Again, I think Cam Newton will work. I've talked about this at length. I think Cam Newton will work at some level. Again, I think Josh McDaniels, who had success with Tim Tebow, has always wanted a mobile quarterback. And again, he'll take some things that he used in Denver with Tebow that had success, as well as some things with Tom Brady that he's had success with over the past couple of seasons. And if they can use Cam Newton like the Panthers did at the start of 2018, getting the ball out quick, not a lot of deep balls, running occasionally, but more getting the ball out quick, being efficient. Cam Newton had almost a 70% completion percentage that year, and Cam Newton was having a fantastic year in 2018 pre-injury. I think if they can have a combination of 2015 MVP Cam and 2018 efficiency version, then Cam Newton could be really, really good for the New England Patriots, and it could work, and the Patriots could be right back at top of the AFC East winning that division. I think Cam Newton will have a bounce-back year. I don't see how he doesn't. In comparison to his last 2 seasons, I think Cam Newton will win games because of that defense, and he doesn't have to do a ton to put the Patriots in the win column when it comes to, you're only going to have to put up maybe, 21, 24 points a game max, because you already know the Patriot defense can totally handle about half the league to under 17 points. Again, the Patriots have the hardest schedule, so I don't know exactly what their record will be depending on how good Cam Newton is. But in comparison to the last 2 seasons, how can Cam Newton not have a bounce-back season? I think it'll happen. Coming up next, I have Baker Mayfield, who I've talked about a lot. I think he'll have a bounce-back year with the Cleveland Browns. How can they not with all that talent and how good they are? Again, Kevin Stefanski, if he can even coach a little bit, will be a home run in Cleveland. That offense will do really, really well. And finally, for the bounce-back season, I have Jared Goff, who I saw led the league in big-time throws, according to PFF, with 17 when it comes to 3rd and 4th down. Jared Goff is a really good player. I've kind of rashed on him because I think he was one of the reasons why the Rams regressed. But that Todd Gurley cloud looming over the entire team did not help. They've lost a lot of guys on the offensive line. They're trying to rejuvenate, pay some people. I don't know how good the Rams will be, but I don't think Jared Goff will have as bad of a season as he did last year. I still believe Jared Goff is really talented and reminds me a lot of Matt Ryan. When everything's clicking for him, Jared Goff is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Again, I was surprised to see that he led the league in big-time throws last season. Worked with a lot last year. The Todd Gurley cloud, Brandon Cooks is now out. They're trying to rejuvenate that team, get better players, get better offensive weapons to maybe return to the Super Bowl like they did 2 years ago. Going to be interesting to see. I think Jared Goff will have a bounce-back year. All right, and let's move on now to some potential breakout seasons. So again, breakout players are guys who I believe could have big seasons when it comes to, not necessarily that they're not on the map right now or they're young, but they can make big jumps from not necessarily like year 1 to year 2 or year 2 to year 3, or guys who've just been a little bit stagnant. So let's just get right into it. Number 1, Miles Sanders, at the running back of the Philadelphia Eagles, had to share the backfield last year with Jordan Howard, who's now with the Miami Dolphins. I like Miles Sanders a lot, actually. He reminds me a lot, ironically, of a receiving back, James White, Alvin Kamara type of thing. And he was a really good 1-2 punch, especially when it comes with Jordan Howard as well. But in my opinion, I think he's going to have a big year. Obviously, he's never really been in the spotlight, not even at Penn State because of Saquon Barkley. But Miles Sanders is really good, showed a lot of flashes last year. Carson Wentz loves to throw to running backs. And I think Miles Sanders is going to have a big season. I think he also battled some injuries last year. So Miles Sanders is a big running back jump guy for me. I think he can become one of the top receiving backs in the league next year and go for a ton of yards, especially in the passing game. Next up, I have TJ Hawkinson, who is the tight end for the Detroit Lions. Again, got hurt last season, but was really showing a lot of promise. Now with the return of Matt Stafford, who just wants to throw to some offensive weapon, I think he could have a big bounce back year. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he emerges as the top young tight end in the league at the end of next season, and maybe even a top 10 tight end statistically by the end of next year. I think he's uber talented. Had a lot of pro comparisons, one of them being Rob Gronkowski coming out of the draft. Again, I think TJ Hawkinson is absolutely incredible, and I think he's one of Matt Stafford's few offensive weapons in the passing game, and he could show a ton of promise next year and have a big season. All right, now let's get into a wide receiver, N'Keal Harry of the New England Patriots. So the Patriots receiving core is an interesting thing. It's not very good on paper, but N'Keal Harry was young last year and dealt with a lot of injuries and again showed those flashes of being a number one receiver. Can he step up and be the best receiver on the team for New England next year? Because that could be the difference between being a real contender and just maybe a mediocre team that could potentially win a division. Again, Julian Edelman as your number one receiver isn't going to get you far. Neither is Mohamed Sanu. But if N'Keal Harry can develop, he is big, athletic, fast, and strong, and be that number one target for Cam Newton. Where there's no better time for N'Keal Harry to step up now with a new quarterback. Tom Brady obviously had his biases, giving Julian Edelman a little bit more love, and the veterans like Mohamed Sanu. Cam Newton will throw to anybody, and I really do believe that N'Keal Harry could have a big jump this season statistically. I don't know if he could become like a top wide receiver like I think TJ Hawkinson or maybe even Miles Sanders could jump to, but if he can just be the number one receiver on that team and get a majority of the touchdowns, he needs to be a red zone machine. Again, big, tall, athletic. That could be a difference maker for the New England Patriots. Let's get into some quarterbacks, starting off with Teddy Bridgewater, who's a little bit later in his career, but I really do believe could have a breakout season statistically with the Carolina Panthers. I love Joe Brady. I love Matt Rule. That's a fantastic young coaching duo, especially when it comes to the offensive side of the ball. You have Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, the best back in the league, and Teddy Bridgewater is not a guy who's going to turn the ball over. He's a good distributor of the ball. I compare him to a point guard in the NBA. He's going to find the open man and get it to him. He, again, great distributor of the ball, isn't going to turn the ball over, isn't going to throw the ball downfield a ton, but maybe that changes. Went 5-0 last year as the New Orleans starter, has really rehabilitated his career after that disastrous injury in Minnesota, so that's really good to see as well. I really do believe Teddy Bridgewater is going to have a good season. I don't know if it'll necessarily translate to wins because of how stacked that division is, but Teddy Bridgewater could have a really big season statistically if he could get over 4,000 yards, maybe get into the mid to high 20s in touchdowns. His interception rate will be low because Teddy Bridgewater, again, does not turn the ball over. Would be really fun to see. I think Teddy Bridgewater could have a big season. Now, Kyler Murray is a really obvious one here. A lot of people have pegged him as the next guy who could make a jump from, young quarterback to MVP that Lamar Jackson made, that Patrick Mahomes made, that Carson Wentz kind of made before getting injured. Again, Kyler Murray could be that guy. DeAndre Hopkins is there now. Kenyon Drake, if he could take the next step as a running back. Kyler Murray this is an obvious answer. Don't have to go too much in depth about it. Could have a fantastic breakout season for the Arizona Cardinals. Wouldn't surprise me at all. And Cliff Kingsbury's season 2 in that system. Again, really good distributor of the ball, really efficient, really good. Again, I really do believe that there is a chance that Kyler Murray has a big season. But the favorite for me who could potentially break out and have an MVP type season after, being a rookie last year, I think Drew Lock has a better chance of being Kyler Murray. Look at all the weapons around in Denver. Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Cortland Sutton, 2 good backs now, Phillip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon, and also Noah Fant at tight end. I mean, they're really talented on the offensive side of the ball. That defense is good, led by Von Miller. I think he'll have a bounce back season like I mentioned. Drew Lock could be the pop guy this year. He could be the guy that started late in the season last year, gets a full season to start, and takes Denver to the playoffs. I don't know necessarily about an MVP candidate or winning that division because of how good Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs are, but I would not be surprised at all. I really like Drew Lock. If he could win 10 or maybe even 11 games for Denver and take them back to the playoffs, he could be the pop guy, that young quarterback who we haven't seen a ton of, but then pops and gets to another level, an all-star and all-pro level. a Pro Bowl level. I think Drew Lock has a better chance of doing that than a Kyler Murray does, for example. All right, we're going to take another quick break. On the other side, I'm going to be talking about how the Miami Heat could be going after another super team, and a little bit more on Victor Oladipo as well, and maybe some other basketball topics if we still have time. That's coming up right after this break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I just finished talking about some potential breakout and comeback and bounce back, seasons in the NFL that I believe could and maybe will happen. I want to switch gears now to the NBA. I hinted at this in my last episode that there were some early reports circulating that Victor Oladipo might want out of Indiana, potentially at the end of this season or at the latest at 2021 when he hits free agency. Again, those quotes coming from the Indy Star saying that what Victor Oladipo wants is that he wants to make as much money as possible and also hit or win big in the playoffs. And I mentioned a lot of teams that could potentially trade for him, like the Nets, the Nuggets. I also mentioned the Bucks as well. But then there were some other reports that came out about where Victor Oladipo would potentially or allegedly prefer to go when he wants out eventually of Indiana, and it is Pat Riley and the Miami Heat who are lurking in the shadows again, trying to build another super team. Obviously, in 2010, they assembled the Avengers, you could say, of Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, and LeBron James. They are now trying to get at it again as early as 2021 and maybe as early at the end of this offseason. Victor Oladipo apparently since high school has wanted to play in the city of Miami. He is almost 28, or I think he's 28, almost 29 now. Again, really good player, averaging almost 20 points a game. I think it's at 18.5 as a career. A little bit of a late bloomer like another player that the Heat have, Jimmy Butler. And apparently, according to the Miami Herald, Barry Jackson, the Heat want to combine getting Victor Oladipo and Giannis Antetokounmpo to pair them up with Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler, as well as some other guys in the young core. Now, for that to work, Victor Oladipo would have to either be acquired after this offseason via trade or via sign and trade at the beginning of the 2021 season. They cannot just outright sign both Victor Oladipo and Giannis Antetokounmpo unless one took a major pay cut. And again, this is no surprise. Pat Riley has always said that he wants one more championship and then he's going to go retire in Malibu where he resides in the offseason. And of course, Pat Riley has always been trying to get back. As he says, when LeBron went back to Cleveland, he saw a dynasty fly out the window. He thought LeBron was going to be a member of the Heat for the next 10 plus seasons. So he's always been trying to crawl and climb back. And it appears that the Heat have finally done that. Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo leading the way. A lot of young pieces that could be potentially moved in a Victor Oladipo trade, which is what I'm going to get into now. How about a trade that could consist around draft picks? Now, draft picks are the currency of the NBA, so this is kind of the first kind of mock trade I have. What if they sent 2 first-round picks over for Victor Oladipo and maybe a cap filler like a Kelly Olynyk, send them that way? Another interesting conversation about what is Victor Oladipo's trade value. Again, just 13 games this season, missed a majority of the season before that. What is his trade value? Because again, this could be potentially trading for an NBA superstar. It could also be trading for a guy who is never going to be the same in his career again, and we don't know which one because, again, he hasn't been on the court and he's not participating in the Orlando bubble this season. So that's a big deal here. So I think his trade value is not as high as maybe Paul George's one was when they moved him to Oklahoma City. I think a more realistic trade is that Indiana's going to want more players than picks. Indiana has a really good team. They have been winning without Victor Oladipo, and like I mentioned on my last show, they know how to play without him, and they've been winning without him. Malcolm Brogdon's a great player, Domantas Sabonis, some other guys as well, Bogdanovich. All these guys are really good, and I think that Indiana would actually want more players than others. And one name sticks out to me in particular. So how I'm imagining a trade conversation between Heat general manager and a Pacers general manager is both are obviously going to the Heat are going to low ball, and the Pacers are going to high ball. So I assume that the Heat are just going to want to give up draft picks with a guy like Kelly Olynyk as a filler, and I think that the Pacers are going to want somebody like a Bam Adebayo who will get immediately rejected, or somebody like a Tyler Hero or Duncan Robinson. Now, I think that's where Indiana would want. I mean, some shooter, again, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero. I don't think the Heat want to part with those two really young shooters because, again, if you have a combination of a team that consists of Oladipo, Butler, and Bam, we'll forget Giannis. I'll get into him in a little bit. Then there's not a lot of floor spacing there. You would need a guy like a Tyler Hero or a Duncan Robinson to really provide floor spacing and be a three-point specialist in that starting five. So I don't think they want to get rid of him. I think that the Heat and the Pacers, as early as this offseason, can maybe meet in the middle. A Kendrick Nunn, Kelly Olynyk pick type deal makes a lot of sense. A backcourt of Kendrick Nunn, who is more of a shooting guard than a point guard. He technically plays point guard for the Heat, but the real point guard for the Heat, the guy who takes up the ball, is obviously Jimmy Butler, occasionally Bam Adebayo, Goran Dragic when he's in the game. Again, I really do believe a backcourt of Malcolm Brogdon, who's more of a true point guard, and Kendrick Nunn, who's just a pure scorer, could really be beneficiary. And again, the Pacers are used to dealing without playing with Victor Oladipo, so it would really just be an addition for them. Getting a guy like Kendrick Nunn who can put up 18 points a game, maybe he could develop a little bit more. He's younger. I think Kendrick Nunn's only 24. Oladipo's almost 29. So you're getting younger there, and you're really playing with the same roster that you've been playing with for over a year and a half now without Oladipo. I see that potentially happening there. I think they could really make it work. And let's just stick with a big three of Bam, Butler, and Oladipo, keeping Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson. That puts you at the top of the contention in the East with the Celtics, with the Bucks. Again, I've said this before. I think the Heat are still one piece away. I think the Miami Heat's dream is to get a Bradley Beal, but I don't think the Wizards are going to be willing to trade for him. Again, if Oladipo wants to be in Miami, apparently since high school he's wanted to play in the city of Miami. That is a big deal. Again, reports coming from the Indy Star, the Miami Herald. So both sides saying that this is a potential match. Now let's get to the second step of what the Heat want to do, and that's bring in Giannis Antetokounmpo in 2021. Now, I think Giannis has a less chance of leaving Milwaukee than LeBron did in Cleveland. I know that doesn't make sense because not a lot of people believe LeBron was going to leave, but during that last week, I actually did some research and looked at reports. It was almost expected that LeBron was going to go somewhere. Not necessarily Miami. Some people thought Chicago. Some people thought New York as well. But there's not a lot of people that actually expect Giannis Antetokounmpo to leave. And I do believe if Giannis just makes it to a finals once over these next 2 seasons, he's not leaving. He would definitely stay with the Milwaukee Bucks. But if it gets interesting is when if he doesn't make a finals over the next 2 seasons, and the Heat do add a guy like Oladipo in the offseason, and they're the ones contending in the East with the Celtics, and maybe not the Bucks, and maybe, the Heat just are one piece away from, again, building another super team like they had in 2010. If the Heat could pull this off, if they could get a Giannis Antetokounmpo and have a starting five of, let's say, Depot at the 1, Duncan Robinson at the 2, Butler at the 3, Giannis at the 4, Bam at the 5, and a 6-man of Tyler Hero, you're seriously looking at the best team in the NBA, in my opinion. Again, I don't necessarily think it's going to happen. Pat Riley always dreams big. Again, I don't think Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to leave the Milwaukee Bucks. I really do believe he'll take them to a finals, maybe even win an NBA finals, and he wouldn't leave. And again, that wouldn't happen until 2021. But let's just stick, again, with a team that consists of, let's say, Tyler Hero at the 1, Duncan Robinson at the 2, Butler at the 3, Tyler Hero at the 1, Victor Oladipo at the 2, Duncan Robinson at the 3, Butler at the 4, or whatever, kind of just a power forward sort of role, and Bam at the 5. That's another really good team, and I think that would really solidify the Heat as the third, maybe even second best team in the East, right up there with the Celtics and right up there with the Bucks. Right now you could say that the Heat are the third best team in the East already, but again, I still think they're definitely a tier below and a step behind the Celtics and the Bucks for really becoming a true NBA championship contender. Victor Oladipo could do that, and if anybody's going to return Victor Oladipo back to form, back to what he was when he was averaging almost 25 points a game. It's Eric Spoelstra. It's the Miami Heat. They have revived careers before. Alonzo Mourning comes to mind as one. Some other guys as well, veterans they brought on with the Big Three Heat team. That to me makes a lot of sense. Victor Oladipo to the Heat makes a lot of sense. Again, the Heat are one piece away, and Pat Riley is willing to take a chance on a guy who maybe hasn't been at the top performance over the last year and a half because of an injury. Again, because he trusts his coaching staff, he trusts his guys to return them to form. It's going to be really interesting to see who the next super team in the NBA could be, and it really could be the Miami Heat. They are plotting again, just as they did in 2010. After the season, after the bubble, and the 2021 offseason, it's going to be something to watch. Imagine if Giannis Antetokounmpo leaves, not necessarily just to the Heat, but to another team, would absolutely shake the NBA. Giannis, when LeBron is gone, will be the best player in the NBA. Maybe not necessarily the face, because I do believe guys like, Zion are in there as well. But again, it's going to be really interesting to see. Maybe Giannis leaves. Again, the Heat are lurking in the shadows, trying to get another Big Three dynasty team. We'll see if Pat Riley can pull it off one more time. Again, I think Victor Oladipo to the Heat makes a lot of sense. Not sure about Giannis Antetokounmpo like those reports are saying. All right, we're going to take one final break. On the other side, I'm going to be giving you guys my top 10 coaches in the NFL, so make sure you stick around for that, and that will come right after this break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network for the final segment of today, and that is going to be giving you guys my top 10, there's going to be 11 names on this list, but top 10 coaches in the entire National Football League. Again, I think when it comes to coaching in sports, I think the most important out of all the four major sports is NFL coaching. I really do believe coaching matters, and when you are a coach of an NFL team, you are one of the biggest reasons, besides maybe the quarterback, for success in Super Bowls and things like that. So let's just get right into it. At number 10, I have a tie between two guys I really couldn't make. One is more of an established head coach. One was a rookie head coach last year. Let's just get right into it. So at tie number 10, Mike Zimmer is tied with somebody who I'll get into in a second. Mike Zimmer I like a lot. I think he's one of the best head coaches in the league, obviously, at number 10 here with a tie with somebody else. One of the best defensive coaches in the league. And the reason why he's not higher, or maybe doesn't solely own number 10, is some of the inconsistencies that the Vikings have had. It seems that they lose to a lot of bad teams, but also beat the good teams. Again, they beat the Saints last year, but also struggled in the regular season to win their division. So again, at number 10, I have Mike Zimmer, and I just don't know how much of the success of the Vikings is attributed to him or Kevin Stefanski, who's now the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. I have him tied with the Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores. Now, I think no coach did more with less last season besides Mike Tomlin, who I'll get into in a little bit. I think Brian Flores was right up there with Tomlin with doing the most with less. Again, with maybe the worst roster in the league, Brian Flores coached that team up to 5 wins. Again, one of the most improving teams both on offense and defense last season. Dealt with a lot of injuries as well. Xavier Howard, their best player overall, did not play a lot last season, only played about 4 or 5 games. Preston Williams, one of the best receivers on the team, tore his ACL. He did not play a lot either. And he just coaches guys up, and guys got better each and every week. Guys like Devontae Parker, who had a breakout season as well. And he just dealt with a lot of turmoil as well. People saying they were tanking to overperform and go 5-4 down the stretch, including beating the New England Patriots in New England last season. I really do believe he's a top 10 coach in the league, and I think he's tied with Mike Zimmer. If I had to pick one to start right now, I'd probably edge out Mike Zimmer a little bit. So maybe, you know what, we'll call it something else. At number 10 is Mike Zimmer, and at honorable mention is Brian Flores, so he's really an 11. At honorable mention, Brian Flores. Number 10, Mike Zimmer. I think Mike Zimmer is just a little bit more established than Brian Flores, but Flores is maybe the best up-and-coming young defensive coach in the league. At number 9, I have Mike Vrabel of the Tennessee Titans, who got Ryan Tannehill to lead them to an AFC championship game. That takes coaching, guys. Coaching. Ryan Tannehill is not some elite quarterback. He wasn't with the Dolphins. He still isn't now. Derrick Henry's obviously a beast, but the Titans have never really seen this much success except for Mike Vrabel. He knew they needed to make a switch to Ryan Tannehill, get him in the right position. That defense is incredible. Again, to beat the New England Patriots, to beat the Baltimore Ravens in the playoffs, Mike Vrabel definitely is a top 10 coach in the league. I think he is the best asset of that team besides Derrick Henry. I think Mike Vrabel is one of the biggest reasons for that team's success, right up there with Derrick Henry. Again, Mike Vrabel, top 10 coach in the league, coming in at number 9. At number 8, I have a Super Bowl champion head coach, Doug Peterson of the Philadelphia Eagles, and I know the Eagles haven't been doing great since then, but again, just a lack of offensive weapons, and he's an offensive coach. I think him and Carson Wentz are the only reason why Philadelphia continues to win divisions and continues to make the playoffs despite an older, deteriorating defense and absolutely nobody at the wide receiver position in the past couple of years. Now, they have gotten better. They've added a lot of players. Miles Sanders, again, I think will have a big jump year this year. But I think Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz are one of the reasons why that the Philadelphia Eagles are even still considered a good team right now. I think Doug Peterson deserves a lot of that credit. He's coming in at number 8. At number 7, I have Sean McVay of the Los Angeles Rams, who I think is almost underrated at this point. Because if you remember, he led them to the Super Bowl, his rookie head coaching season, and last year he took a big, big hit. They weren't doing so well. They went 9-7 and missed the playoffs. But you have to remember, they are playing in the hardest division in the league. They had to pay a ton of guys. They lost a ton of guys. Todd Gurley didn't really play for them. Lost guys like Ndamukong Suh, more players on the defense. Jalen Ramsey just got there. He had to get acclimated. Sean McVay's not working with any draft picks either. There's no rookies, just constant stars coming in and out, in and out. It's a hard team to coach. I really do believe that. And I think Sean McVay's a special head coach in this league. I think the Rams will have somewhat of a bounce-back season eventually. Don't know if it's this year because of how hard that division is. But again, if Jared Goff can just bounce back like I think he could, the Rams could be right back up there depending how good San Francisco is. I've already talked about how they might have a little bit of a slip up. Sean McVay's still a really good coach in this league, guys. I have him coming in at number 7. Number 6, I have San Francisco's coach Kyle Shanahan, who is the best run game planner in the entire league. Every running back that works with Kyle Shanahan works, and I know Matt Breida and Mostert are probably not, or Matt Breida is already not there, and obviously Mostert's probably not going to be there either, but I'm not too worried. I really do believe that their running game will still be one of the top in the league. Kyle Shanahan's only problem is playoff success. Why has he choked 2 Super Bowls? That matters. Why did he choke with Atlanta as the offensive coordinator and obviously as the head coach for San Francisco now? Those are my only concerns with him, which is why he's not maybe top 5, why he's number 6. Again, Kyle Shanahan for San Francisco there. Just need more establishment. Finally get over the hump, get that Super Bowl ring. Reminds me a lot of a younger Andy Reid, who I'll get to later. Andy Reid was a great offensive mind, just never won the big game for a long time until this season. Kyle Shanahan reminds me a ton of a young Andy Reid. That would be my comparison with him. Kyle Shanahan will eventually get a Super Bowl with San Francisco. It just is a matter of when, not if, in my opinion. Don't think it'll come this year, but maybe down the line, years and years down the future. He's still a really young guy. At number 5, I have Mike Tomlin. So I already talked about Brian Flores, but in my opinion, Mike Tomlin did the most with less out of anybody. Again, Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph as your quarterback, and you go 8-8. That is absolutely ridiculous. I don't know how many head coaches would have been able to do that. Mike Tomlin is also the ultimate players coach besides maybe Pete Carroll. I think he's maybe the best head coach when it comes to the microphone as well. He's a leader. He's vocal. Everybody likes to play for Mike Tomlin. Again, if Big Ben can come back to just 80-85% of what he's always been, Steelers could be a real threat in the AFC North. I love Mike Tomlin. I think he's a fantastic head coach. Definitely top 5 in the league. Again, nobody did more with less. Mike Tomlin coming in at number 5. At number 4, I have Sean Payton of the New Orleans Saints, who has just been kind of choking recently when it comes to the playoffs. They haven't been able to win the big game the past couple of years, but Sean Payton's one of the most creative offensive minds in the league. Obviously, him and Drew Brees are one of the top quarterback coaching duos and have been forever, it appears now. And I don't think Sean Payton's run is also going to end when Drew Brees retires inevitably, probably at the end of this season. Jameis Winston, I think, is a really talented guy, was second in the league in passing yards. Again, those interceptions are his problem. He's had LASIK, and I really do believe Sean Payton could make him the successor to Drew Brees. I don't think it's Taysom Hill. I don't buy into that nonsense that this wide receiver tight end is going to go back to playing quarterback when he wasn't even necessarily the real quarterback at BYU. I think it'll be Jameis Winston. I just think Sean Payton has a lot of brilliance and a lot of genius when it comes to the offensive side of the ball, and I don't think that'll stop with Drew Brees. And while Drew Brees is a really good, really talented, really smart quarterback, he owes a lot of that success to Sean Payton as a game coordinator and as a play designer as well. So Sean Payton coming in for me at number 4. At number 3, I have Baltimore Ravens head coach John Harbaugh, and I think he's top 3 because he wins a different way every time, it appears. Not necessarily like week to week, but year to year. Obviously, Joe Flacco is a completely different quarterback than Lamar Jackson, but to be able to really reinvent your team, both offensive and defensively, after winning a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco and then eventually transitioning to Lamar Jackson, shows real coaching and a real coaching talent. Again, I think John Harbaugh also has an incredible eye for talent. The Ravens constantly draft well and always seem to get a steal in the draft, Lamar Jackson included. I think John Harbaugh's a top 3 coach in the league. If Lamar can just make a couple more strides as a passer, which under the coaching of John Harbaugh I think he will, then there could be some real threat to Kansas City on who would run the AFC East, Lamar or Mahomes. And again, if Lamar can just make some more strides, that defense is not going anywhere. They're fantastic. Most talented roster in the league, in my opinion. Could be really fun to watch Baltimore over the next decade. At number 2, I have Andy Reid, who I think he's the best play designer in the NFL. Yes, he is the best quarterback in the NFL, and that might seem unfair and one of the reasons why Andy Reid is so good. But you forget, Andy Reid was good before Mahomes. He was good with Michael Vick in Philly, some other guys in Philly as well, and then obviously in Alex Smith in Kansas City before Patrick Mahomes even got there. So Andy Reid is a phenomenal head coach. He's always been top 5 in the league for a while. Again, finally won the big game, finally got that Super Bowl, and again, they're Super Bowl favorites this year. I don't think they'll win it necessarily, but I really do believe Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are a fantastic duo, and I think Andy Reid is a top 3 head coach. I think he comes in at number 2. Best offensive head coach in the league, in my opinion. Not sure how close it is either from an offensive standpoint. And finally, we have Bill Belichick coming in at number 1. No surprise here. He is the best head coach in the league still defensively. Going to be so interesting to see what he does with Cam Newton, him and Josh McDaniels. But you already knew this, that Bill Belichick is the best head coach in the league and probably ever in NFL history. Bill Belichick coming in at number 1. What else can I say? Best head coach in the league. Again, going to be so interesting to see what he does post-Tom era. All right, that is going to do it for today's episode of the GSMC podcast, our sports podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you so much for listening. Again, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave a 5-star review, and also follow us on all social media platforms so we can interact with you guys there. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all in the next episode.